Chicago, it's Startup Hypeman, the podcast. What's up, everyone? My name is Raj Nation, founder and chief pitch artist at Startup Hypeman, where we help startups, scale-ups, and grown-ups not suck at how they pitch themselves so they stand out to their audience and stand apart from the competition. This podcast is all about bringing you the hearts, the minds, and the stories of leaders in the startup ecosystem, talking through the strategies they have deployed in order to build and grow their companies. And it's officially season 17 of the show, and all season long we've got a special treat for you, bringing you guests exclusively from the Startup Hypeman client portfolio, giving you a piece of their journey. Before we begin, if you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And remember, you can catch all the episodes from our 17th season archive and learn how to pitch your startup at startuphypeman.com. All right, get your popcorn ready and get hyped because it's go time. Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone from San Francisco, California, he is the co-founder and COO of Blueboard. Please welcome Kevin Yip.
Sorry, I feel like I had to do that just to accentuate.
You had to flex on him. You had to flex on him. I love it. He is Kevin Yip, co-founder and COO of Blueboard, as I mentioned. And all this season on Startup Hypeman, the podcast, we are welcoming as our guests different clients who have come through our portfolio as customers at Startup Hypeman. This is season 17, episode 7. And Blueboard is just one of my favorite companies that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. Awesome culture, awesome people. They have really grown over the last few years, having raised $16 million and growing to 200 plus employees, as well as getting their revenue up to about $50 million of annual revenue. It's been awesome to see the growth. And I think the fact that those are some of the numbers out of the gate help put some context around our conversation today, because it's been a journey to get there. And that's why our topic today is going from no brand to known brand. Kevin, once again, welcome. Why is this on your mind? Why is this important to you?
You know, I think a company is a brand and a product that never stops unfolding. You're always discovering nuances about who you are, what you want to deliver, the value you kind of have for your customers. And so I think it's part of entrepreneurship is building an amazing brand, a like kind of long-standing brand, and it's always on my mind. I'm always thinking about it, and it's kind of been on since day one, so to speak. So I think it's really important.
We're going to dive a whole lot more into Blueboard's path in brand growth. Before we get there, let's learn a little bit more about Kevin himself. Now, Kevin, I've known you for like 3 years now, I think. And I never knew that you were co-owner, or maybe are still co-owner, of a Japanese restaurant. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So a friend and I, a little bit before I started Blueboard, opened up a Japanese curry bar. And we just love Japanese curry. It's a passion. And we thought, hey, like, there are not enough Japanese curry restaurants in San Francisco, which is odd, right? Yeah. There was one major player and they were a lunch spot. And we're like, hey, let's open like more of a late night dinner spot. We'll do about half of our meals takeout, half in, and let's just find a small, cool place and make really great curry. And that was awesome. Ran that for, we were doing that for about 3-4 years. We ended up shutting it down because Blueboard was actually growing, couldn't work the restaurant anymore. And my buddy, was going another direction, was having a family and had some other things going on. But serving bowls of Japanese curry, I was pounding the chicken katsu. It took about 2.5 days to make the curry from scratch. Yeah, it was really fun. I think that's where I learned, like, I got a lot of fulfillment out of that, just because you get to see like people enjoy the meal and thank you. And you're like, oh, like that's like it's a moment in their day. And so I really I realized that, that was very fulfilling for me.
What do you think running a restaurant taught you about running a tech company?
Ooh, first off, you're never above any of the work, right? And so, maybe you're the co-founder of some big company, but you could, or the owner of this restaurant, but if the floors are dirty, you got to clean them, right? And so I would be, literally on all fours, scrubbing the brass, like, foot pedals and things like that. And that's part of the grind, right? I think, when I was running that restaurant, I think also connecting with kind of the, just the regulars. We had a lot of regulars kind of come in. It was like a neighborhood, kind of a little bit above the Tenderloin, kind of like Tender Knob area. And just connecting with them, getting to know them. And they, when I connected with somebody, they would come in more, right? They felt like an affinity to the, to the restaurant, to the establishment, to the food, because there was a relationship with myself. And so you kind of saw this like loyalty kind of build and grow from, simple conversations, getting to know folks. I think the last thing is when I was running the restaurant, I was also starting Blueboard. So it was, working on the company Blueboard from like, 8:30 to 5. I'd open up the restaurant at 5:30 and, close it down at 11. And
it's a hell of a schedule.
That was it was a grind. It needed to be done. But it also took a huge toll on me. And, I was super burnt out by the time the restaurant shut down. And just, not super, like, my mental health wasn't great. And I think, early on, I got a sense of like, okay, like if you're running on E, you can only do it so long. And there's some big costs to doing that, right? It takes you and saps you of the energy that you need to honestly build a company, right? To kind of put your heart and soul into building a startup. And so I've been really kind of cued into kind of my energy levels, my mental health, like, the energy in my tank, so to speak, since that time.
Yeah. On that note, what are some personal wellness or mental health practices that you try to incorporate into your routine?
For me, what I've realized is, there's a few things really important to me. I need and want to spend time with people close to my life, family, friends, and make time for that. Eating healthy, and exercise and sleeping well. I mean, it's simple, but in the grind of things, it could become very hard to do. And over the years, I think I've just gotten better at making time, whether it's, putting blocks on my calendar to work out, meal prepping, on Sundays to eat healthy, having like my hosting a dinner with my folks while I'm working, but we're maybe watching football. And, we have like kind of lunch and dinner together. So we're just spending a lot of time together. So I feel like I can work a little bit while they're there. Little stuff like this that like kind of gives me energy, gives me joy. Just make time for it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that comes back to one of the other things you said you learned at the restaurant was that importance of connection, which I'm clearly seeing as a consistent theme, not just with the restaurant, but in your personal and professional life. So perhaps that's a good jump off point to, maybe you could just explain how did Blueboard get started? And, I didn't in the introduction explain what Blueboard actually does. So perhaps, talk about how Blueboard got started. And for anyone who's not familiar, what is Blueboard?
Yeah. So Blueboard is an experiential rewards recognition and incentive company. And so when great people at a company do great work, hit their 10-year anniversary, close the biggest deal in company history, they often get cash, get maybe a Amex gift card like myself. They might get a big screen TV, some swag, or they might get nothing, right? And so we think a really impactful reward for great work and achievement is a personal experience. So them taking their kids to their first baseball game, learning to surf in Hawaii, going skydiving for the first time, memories and experiences that they'll remember. And so that's kind of our product and kind of our mission is to help people get out and about in the world for great work. How we started, interestingly, was I was living with a buddy of mine who I've known since third grade. We started the company together, and we'd be coming home in our first, corporate jobs, kind of in our early 20s, and it would just be this rot routine, right? We'd be watching Sports Center, enter some Bay Area sports team, and at the end of the night, one of these days, it was like probably the 10th day in a row that it felt like that I was doing this, and I was like, it took about a year, and I kind of vented. It took about a year for us to become the most boring freaking people. Like we've been literally drinking the same beer, watching the same TV show, the same sports team. Like, what's going on? And I was like, what happened? And I was like, kind of like, what happened to when we were learning languages or making music? Even simple things like playing sports. We become observers of life almost, if you will. And so that was like just lamenting by me. And at the end of it, we took a pact between roommates, and we're like, hey, what's one thing we've been wanting to do, but we haven't made time for? And from every week for the next 3 months, we will do that activity. So for me, that was Krav Maga. I've always wanted to try it. My other buddy, my co-founder, did singing lessons. And every week we were just looking forward to that activity. We're building this new, kind of this new skill and kind of like this, beginner mindset in learning something new, adding this new wrinkle to our character. And at the end of the 3 months, we realized and talked about it. We're like, wow, such a simple commitment had like this outsized impact on our happiness. And that was really inspiring. And we were like, let's start a company to help people get on experiences. No product idea, no engineers. It took us about 2 years, but what we ended up coming to was, building this kind of rewards and recognition product, that we're at today.
Which is all about the point of experiences over things and how you choose to recognize and reward employees. So let's use that as sort of at least our understanding for learning about the Blueboard brand. And again, our topic today is going from no brand to known brand. So I think the best way we can dive into this is, how do you, Kevin, just define brand at a base level?
Yeah. Really simply, like I see brand as like a promise you deliver to your customers. And when you have no brand, you're small, you have no customers. And it is about kind of finding those customers that are going to bet on you, right? Really deliver something of value, and then bring that story out of them and telling that to the rest of the market. And so, yeah, brand is for me a promise, you deliver to your customers.
Well, and I think Blueboard is such a classic startup case, like a tech startup case of the product that you're bringing to market requires education, right? Like you're introducing a different way of doing things as opposed to, for example, if you were to start a web design company, it's not like the concept of web design is necessarily a new concept to your market, unless you've got some, crazy way of doing it that's different. But you're going into a market where the status quo, the standard is companies reward their employees with either cash, gift cards, or a catalog of things they can choose from, like a blender or, like my wife's 10-year anniversary gift at her hospital was a keychain for 10 years, a keychain.
Yeah.
Right. So there you are trying to educate the market on a different way of doing things, while at the same time, no one knows who you are. You don't have cachet. You don't have brand equity, right? And these are important things that you need to be able to influence another party. So how would you define like that first phase of Blueboard, where it's like education plus who the hell are we, and trying to get the market to understand that?
Yeah. I think this is like it's a tough stage in a startup journey, because you need to be, I don't know about if ruthless is the right word, but you need to like really tell people the story and almost do it at all cost, right? And it's educating people on why you exist, the value you bring, even though you may not have any customers, right? That might be just the insight you have. That might be the founding story. But you also, at the same time of kind of like having that evangelical sale, you need to really listen, right? You need to really understand your customer and what problem they're solving and how they think about the decision and who else do they loop into that process, right? How they budget for it, when they budget for it. And so it's a mix of like almost shouting from the rooftop and like listening at the ground level. And that kind of iteration, and call it, movement to call it like early brand story market fit is super important. Is that kind of that mix of kind of evangelism plus like close listening and observation. Yeah.
I really like how you said shout it from the rooftops, but listen at ground level. And then I also really love that term of story market fit, which I think is a great reframing of the whole situation. Not so much product market, but is the story that connecting with them. So on that note of in that phase of story market fit, what did customer acquisition look like when you were in that stage of story market fit?
So I didn't tell our kind of our current product's founding story, but it was telling that story. And so for me and my co-founder, we had been working on projects, 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, and, doing it for a long time, 10, 12, 15 weeks. And by the end of it, both of us were, 15, 20 pounds heavier. Like we're anxious. We're eating unhealthy.
You had to have been working at like an investment bank or something like that.
Yeah. We're both like, he was in consulting. I was working at PwC and in finance. And I remember my manager coming up to me and she's like, Kevin, amazing job. Like I had two other associates quit, much smarter than me, before this project, and had to get both of their work done. And so, she came up to me, thanked me, and put down this Amex gift card on the table and like slid it over to me. And for me, when I got that, rather than feeling appreciated and valued and motivated to work hard on the next project, it felt impersonal. I felt undervalued and I was demotivated to work hard on the next project. And, the idea was like, oh, imagine if my manager had come up to me and said, hey, Kevin, amazing job. I know you love boxing. Got you this boxing membership for the next 3 months to the gym around the corner.
Well,
or,
because
hey,
like,
yeah.
If I'm hearing that, right, you're working at PwC as an associate. I mean, even though it was fresh out of college or first couple years out of college, like your salary there is pretty good. So an extra, I don't know, $50, $75 is probably, whatever that gift card was. Maybe it was like $200. I don't know. You're probably like, I mean, that's fine, but it's not like I was strapped for cash to begin with, right? I have to imagine that was your mindset as part of that.
Yeah. It's not material. It's not life-changing. And you end up using it on, honestly, stuff and crap you don't remember. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the experience was, it was like, okay, like saying thank you to a top employee should be a connection. We're getting to a connection, right? Yeah. It should build your relationship with the company, with the manager. But giving, this gift card, giving like this thing, it feels transactional. It feels impersonal. It doesn't connect with that employee. And so we would tell this story, and we literally went door to door. Every single startup in San Francisco that had raised more than $10 million, we walked into. I got kicked out of Dropbox, which was hilarious. That was another story on the side. But we would tell that, we would tell this story, to the office manager, to the receptionist at the front desk. And through it all, we got really good at telling this story and figuring out, okay, like just because, the person at the front desk likes it doesn't mean it's gonna, they're gonna, intro us to the VP of HR. And we got a few meetings. Conversion was low, but at this stage, all you need is a few wins And we happened that a VP of talent at a company called Vungle, hot ad tech startup, was waiting for an interview, and he said, "Oh, that's really cool. I got an interview right now, but let's meet after this because I've been thinking about how to reward and incentivize our team." And Vungle became our first customer, April 2014. They're still a customer today. And, that starts your brand because now you have a customer and now you have a promise you need to deliver to them. And then we took Vungle, we made them really happy. We figured out what we were doing well. We started telling, hey, Vungle, really hot startup, growing very quickly, uses us to reward employees, in a meaningful way because they just don't have time to do it. Right. And so that was our first evolution of, okay, our story and our value and, so on and so forth, as we, got new customers and learned more about what we could do.
So it grows from your personal story pre-product to now here's the story of the product in action.
Yeah, we tacked on the product in action and the value. Yeah. And now we have, I'm not even in sales. I don't even do sales as much, which is kind of a sad thing to say, but now it's, it centers around, the mission of the company, which is, kind of parallel to the story, but, doesn't include obviously my personal story. And then, really talking about the value of our product and our offering and what problems we're trying to solve and what are they trying to unlock in their employees and the culture they're trying to have. And so, it has evolved quite a bit, since those early kind of no brand days, so to speak.
Yeah. Now I got to ask, cause you mentioned it. You said you just casually mentioned it. You said we got kicked out of Dropbox. Can you please share that story?
Yeah. So and I'll fully admit, like when we started this company, I was a complete amateur. Like I literally knew nothing. And one of the things I didn't know was like, I remember his name. He was like Kevin Egan or something. He's the VP of sales at Dropbox. And I was like, oh yeah, we have a meeting with him at 3. We're talking about sales incentives. And the receptionist, and Dropbox is this hot company at the time, they're like, clicked on his calendar and they were like, yeah, you're not on here. And they're like, no, I think I am. And they're like, then they turn around the monitor and they're like, no, I'm looking at his calendar right now and you're not on it. And he's like, so what's up? And we're like, that must be a mistake. And so we just like, honestly, we're like kind of had no idea what to do. And then they called security and like escorted us out during lunchtime. And so I didn't, for some reason, I didn't know that, you could look at the calendar or like at it, like, they had like probably like, several hundred employees that the person would anyways. So we got kicked out. It was embarrassing.
That's kind of, but I mean, I don't know. I love like the hustle and the zeal and just like the almost like the blind faith that like, yeah, we're going to walk in and it's going to work. And if it doesn't, well, whatever. It's not, it's not the end of the world.
Totally.
I think there's a
it's
lot,
not the end of the world.
Behind that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to transition now to talk more about kind of like the growth phase of Blueboard. But before I do that, I just want to talk to our listeners for a moment, especially as our listeners, as you think about growth yourselves. A big part of that is kind of understanding your lead flow and knowing what's happening on your website. Specifically, what are you tracking on your website? Are you using Google Analytics? If you are you in love with it? Probably not, because when it comes to using GA, understanding where and why you lose site visitors before they convert is just really hard. There's always some integration issue, or you got to sort through a mountain of data just to figure out what's causing your leads to drop off. And that's kind of a nightmare. That's why I was excited to learn of a better way to measure website analytics. And that's where Oribi comes into play. Oribi is a unique marketing analytics tool that captures all the events visitors perform on your website without any code. Oribi enables you to analyze visitor behavior patterns, build smart funnels, and get tons of insights so you always know what your next step is going to be. And that means finally understanding your visitors and knowing what to change in order to convert more, which means finally no more blind spots. Now, I'm excited to have Oribi as a partner of the show. You can get your free trial today at oribi.io/today. That's oribi.io/today. And as a partner of the show, you can use the coupon code Hypeman for 20% off any plan. or reebly.io/today. Use the coupon code Hypeman, all one word, for 20% off any plan. Today on Startup Hypeman, the podcast, we are with Kevin Yip, the co-founder and COO of Blueboard, talking about going from no brand to known brand. Now, before the break, Kevin, we were kind of talking about the early days of Blueboard, getting off the ground, getting that first customer, and how the brand really starts to build from there. So then as you enter that growth phase, can you kind of explain how do things shift, right? You mentioned how now there's a story around how someone else is using your product, but then how do you start to scale that story?
And, I think the first thing is being dialed in to the customer and the value you're providing, right? And that should be the foundation of your story, right? And you should use your customers as salespeople, right? As marketers, right? Bring them along, connect with them, build relationships, right? That's how you really kind of getting to really know like how they're using it, when they're using it, like what's the feedback from the employees that receive these experiences, right? Like, is it easy to use? Is it known by the CEO down to like kind of the remote offices? And so you do that at an early stage by being building relationships with your customers, and from there, like I feel like using those customers to market you, to tell the story, and making simple asks, right? As you built it is like, straight sales asks, right? Hey, do you know a few HR folks that you can introduce me to, right? Where, it seems like you're getting a lot of value out of this and we're kind of in the early stage. We would love to talk to more people. If you've built that relationship, if there's value being delivered, every single one of those will introduce you to the couple people you ask, and probably more if they know more, right? And so we made those asks, and we were lucky enough to get those kind of introductions. And that is on top of kind of your, we were also doing outbound. We were also continuing to go into, getting kicked out of, front offices and lobbies and doing that. But like this piece was like where you kind of get really close with your customer, get to know them, have them talk about you, build like, get your first customer, build a case study.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? See, right. And that played out. We've had, to date, we've had probably, I don't even know how many count, but like as people move jobs, you build relationships with them, right? They're moving up in their career, and a lot of them have taken Blueboard with them. We've had, we launched in 2014, so it's been, quite a while now, but we've had people take us to, 2 companies, 3 companies and implement us. Right. And so those have just been awesome folks. And just super, super huge advocates of us. And so like when others, right, start telling your story, particularly your customers, that's how it starts getting traction, right? You've told the story. You've told the story of your insight and founding. You've promised, there's a certain value that you're going to deliver to a customer. And then they tell that they're telling, hey, this company, my employees are stoked, right? When they hit their anniversaries, it's super easy. And, it's great if you're thinking about, how do you improve culture in order to like motivate it and keep your top people, right? Boom. You should talk to this company. And like now they make it their story, right? Becomes like, oh, this cool program that they've implemented. It becomes part of their personal and professional brand. And so, yeah, that's just been absolutely huge for us kind of in the early days and still today.
So a lot of like intentional word of mouth, not by accident, but almost like by design.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it can happen intentionally, but it's going to happen much slower, right? People are doing their,
you're saying that it can happen by accident, but slower.
It can happen by accident. But it'll just be much slower. And I think, you'll be surprised that, if you're delivering value, if you have a good relationship with your early customers, they're going to be up there, like kind of shouting from the rooftops as well, if you ask them.
Now, aside from word of mouth, one of the things I've observed in Blueboard's not just go to market, but sustaining in the market and growing within the market is a pretty big, I think you guys have grown a pretty big like online presence. And I feel like very often I am seeing notifications of Blueboard's at this conference or Blueboard is running this webinar. Can you talk through how you start to like figure out, what are the levers that we're going to pull and start like building up some equity in the market aside from the individual sales conversations that we're having on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So I think, right, jumping off from being close to your customer, right? We realized that we did really well in companies and in HR teams that wanted to be, progressive, that were really focused on culture, that talent was a top priority. And we knew that from being close to them, as well as that, like, they're community driven, right? They hung out in professional kind of communities, associations, right? And so that's how they kind of were able to connect about how to solve kind of problems, right? It was a very community driven profession. And so we started talking and being like, hey, like, who else is trying to sell to the progressive HR community? Who's bigger than us? Who's, not telling the same story, but, a similar story about improving culture and caring about your people. And we found that there were, a good amount of like later stage startups that had cool products in different spaces than us. We looked at Culture Amp, which is now, a unicorn, 15.5, Lattice, namely some of these names, right? And what we did was like, we kind of looked at their go-to-market and realized, they were doing a lot of, kind of what you talked about, digital events, webinars, et cetera. And this is probably like circa, 2017, right? And they had, it seemed like, they had good content and they had a good community and good mailing list that we wanted to be a part of. And so for every partner early on, we came up with a couple ideas on what would they want to be a part of, topic wise, and let us propose the idea, and we'll do all the work. We'll bring the customer, right? They can bring somebody if they want to, and all they have to do is shoot it to their mailing list, right? And so we did that for every single customer, and they're startups too, right? They're trying to come up with ideas, right? They're trying to build kind of their reach, and we made it literally, hey, just put an email together, send it through, and we'll do everything else. And some of them got more engaged than obviously that, but we made it that simple. And so that's, we did, those, more, we still do webinars with those people, with those companies, but that, shut up our kind of reach, in our database from, probably a couple thousand to now we're, in the, probably nearing 150, 200,000 on the mailing list. And so that's
huge. 200,000 people on a mailing list is huge.
Yeah. And so that motion early on of like, okay, like who else, bigger than us that is selling to the same buyer as us. And like, let's work with them. Let's kind of, let's build relationships and connect with them, offer them value. And then in return, we can get some awareness that people kind of know what Blueboard is and, what we stand for. And so that was very helpful. Yeah.
From personal experience, probably the top thing that grew Startup Hypeman over the last year was a very similar approach, which is showing up in a lot of places online with other partners, right? With other companies and running these like partner webinars or partner workshops. And it, a couple of years ago, I had a guest on the show by the name of Sean Amirati. He's a venture capitalist, and he also authored this book called The Science of Growth, which looked at really like it studied pairs of companies who were doing nearly identical things in nearly identical markets and saying, okay, well, what led one company to scale and the other one to stall out? So it looked at like, we all know YouTube, but there was another company at the time called Rever, and no one's ever heard of Rever. We know Tesla. There was another company called Fisker, and no one really ever remembers Fisker. And there was WordPress, and then there was another one. So anyways, they looked at like 6 to 8 different pairs of companies, and then they boiled it down to like 5 or 6 specific principles that are behind what they call the science of growth. And one of those principles was the ability to, they called it draft off of other people's platforms. And that's what I think this model is here, is right. You're able to draft off of the success of someone else, not in like a insidious or like devious way, but in a way that benefits the both of you. Because I think for the partner, right? Let's say you partner with an HR conference, or you partner with a Lattice or something like that. They're building up their brand equity by bringing something new to their audience around whatever the topic you're going to talk about is. And on your side, right, you're getting potential, like you're both getting potential leads. You're both getting, you're both building up your brand in the process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's been a huge kind of lever.
Within that, actually, though, can you talk through like, because I've got a very specific approach when I'm doing Startup Hypeman webinar, workshop content, and I want to hear your kind of reaction to this. I think the key, and I believe Blueboard's going about it this way as well, because I see a lot of companies get this wrong, is they turn the webinar into a product pitch. Like it's like a 30-minute product pitch. But the webinar's got to like educate the market on something, right?
100%. We maybe have done a couple, call it webinars, where they're more product rollouts, but we're very upfront about that. Mm-hmm. And the people that sign up, are wanting to learn more about the product. The types of webinars that, I'm talking about are, thought leadership and educational by nature, right? How are we getting a customer to share their insight on, it might not even be related to Blueboard, but it just might be related to, target, identifying high potential talent within your organization and creating an elevated employee experience to make sure that they have the career development and growth to stay at your company. As an instance, we've done something like that, right? There's obviously a lot of tangents, in how it relates to Blueboard indirectly, but maybe, we probably talked about Blueboard in the beginning of, oh yeah, I'm the co-founder of Blueboard. This is what we do. Okay, cool. Let's focus on this topic that our buyers really care about, right? And that other companies really care about and can make a difference for their organization. And, I think, I remember us talking is, how do you choose, within your brand and what and what you have unique insight to, what are your kind of like spheres of influence or topics of influence that you focus on in driving the conversation? Mm-hmm. And, how to, attract, motivate, and keep your top talent. That is definitely a sphere of influence that in the topic of influence that we focus on. Yeah.
I've got a few more questions I want to get through before we hit our wrap up. One of them is, was there a moment where you were like, wait a sec, like you looked around and you were like, hang on, people know us now. Like we're not a nobody anymore. Do you recall, was there like a moment in time or like a series of events where that realization occurred?
I would say where there's been a couple of times going into, we Procter & Gamble as a customer, and I ended up flying out to Boston to their grooming division to pitch and close that deal. Abbott Labs, similarly, and these are the type of companies that these are kind of among the best known brands in the world, worldwide organizations. And it was less of like people know us, but I was like, oh wow, like we have a real opportunity to deliver this at a large scale, because a company like Procter & Gamble sees the value in Blueboard and wants to roll this out to their organization. And it was, that's kind of, those are kind of the marquee customers and clients that kind of like, they almost like unlock like a new market, and they kind of internally give you the confidence that you as a startup are like, oh, like they want us, right? And so I feel like there's like these kind of unlocks where like they can become marquee clients, but then also like they give the startup the confidence to be like, yeah, we can deliver to, a company like Procter and Gamble. And so like, I think those have been like, phases of like, this is like a really cool customer, and we have like this opportunity to deliver something like pretty meaningful to like just an awesome organization.
One of the things that struck me about Blueboard right when we first started working together a few years ago was how committed you and the entire company was to your point of view around experiences, not things. That's the way to recognize and reward people. How, when you walk into a Procter and Gamble, when you walk into an Abbott, how important is it to commit to your point of view? And is there wiggle room on it? Do you waver? Do you tuck it under the table and not talk about it because it's a bigger player? Like talk to us about point of view and how you leverage that and how important it might actually be.
Yeah. One, it's super important to be who you are, right? Because ultimately, if you try to change yourself, right, you're going to eventually spread yourself too thin. You're not going to be able to scale. And so like you need to be who you are. And for us, going back to our founding story, right, we started as an experience company, right? We didn't start as a rewards and recognition company. We started as an experience company. We saw the value that myself and our roommates had from doing something once a week for 3 months. And we, that was enough for us to have this energy and zeitgeist to like start a company. And so that is our mission, right? We've been, on that mission since day one to get more people out and about on experiences. And I don't ever see that changing. I think, there's this vision framework on how to think about a vision. There's things in a company that should never change, that should be sacred to the company. Those are mission. That's your mission. Those are your values, right? They may evolve, but like they stay at the core the same. And then how the product builds, the product vision, how you get there should always be changing, because you're always, hopefully progressing. Sometimes you regress, right? And you're at different spots and you need to think about things differently in order to like bring this mission to life. And so the mission and the values of the company should never change. And I get excited, and I use this a lot for companies, is I know a company will be a great customer if their mission and their values align with ours. Right. And so, for example, Abbott, and, when I went in, their mission and kind of their branding is, live life to the fullest, right? They help people, be healthy so that they can live life, right? And Blueboard is, it's on the other side of that kind of spectrum of like, now that you're healthy and living life, like, what are your passions, right? What do you want to do something new? Like, who do you want to spend quality time with? And, I basically, at the end of the pitch, I was like, hey, Blueboard and Abbott, we're kindred companies. We're moving in the same direction, trying to deliver like great lives to people. On your side, keeping them healthy, on our side, delivering experiences. Let's, live out this promise and deliver that promise to your employees as well. And they really bought onto that. And so when you get into these big organizations, you're there for a reason, right? Because of who you are, like double down, triple down, 10, be that, because that's gonna that resonance and that like kind of hook you have kind of with your customer and like kind of their emotion, like it's because of who you are, and just, continue to do that. Anyways, that's worked for us. Yeah.
I got one more question, then we'll hit our wrap up, and it's continuing on that note of committing to the point of view. And I want to have some, this whole thing has been real talk, but I really want to get into some real talk on that, because the reality is, a couple of years ago, Blueboard was tested, right? March 14th or whatever it was, 2020. Everything shuts down, and the ability to even experience is taken off the table by something you have no control over. And that was a moment where I have to imagine you had this dialogue internally around like, well, do we start maybe offering gift cards to things as part of our product offering, or do we commit to experiences? Like, I think that was probably a big reckoning of identity and point of view. Can you explain what that was like, and what decisions did you come to in those moments?
Yeah, it was stressful. But I think as an entrepreneur, there's a little bit of chaos that you like, and not in the, hey, like it's kind of like, it's the 2-minute warning and you're down by 7, right? Or 6. It's the last possession of a basketball game. And you don't want to be in that situation. You want to be up by 30, right? But when you're in that station, it's kind of what you train for. It's kind of what you live for, right? And for us, it was once again like, okay, who are we, right? Even though people can't get out and about in the world, like they are wanting to more than ever, right? When I was, kind of stuck here at home, and I'm sure many people were during shelter in place, it's like, you were like, yearning for connection, for, doing things outside. And so like what we did, we very quickly launched in-home experiences where it might be, hey, build a lab, with your kid at home, right? We had like virtual language, we'd, ship, instruments from Guitar Center, and then have like virtual like drum and like guitar lessons. Another one was we would do, an astronomy class paired with getting a telescope. We would do like a plant and botany class paired with a greenhouse. And so we got creative with it, and things that like we didn't really offer before, but people loved it, right? And people couldn't do anything else, and people got a lot of value from it. And so that's kind of like where we kind of focused, is kind of this in-home of like, you could still spend quality time. You could still do some things you love, try things new in your home. We just got to think about it a little differently.
And I think that's so, I just don't want anyone listening to like overlook the importance of what Kevin just said, which is like, because, brand has to have a point of view behind it. And I think it's really almost, I could argue it's easy to maintain your point of view when things are going great. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to stay committed to that when unknown things happen or when things aren't going well. But I think that's the point of knowing your identity and knowing your brand, and you stay committed when you're committed to the extent that you just find ways to make before that, I'm sure you were never thinking of, well, let's have an experience, be an in-home science experiment with your kids. But because experiences over things is the commitment of the point of view, therefore the commitment of the brand, you say, all right, what's any possible way an experience can come to life, even if someone can't even leave their house? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, allows the brand to prevail and not bend to the whim of market fluctuations you don't have control over, and then become just like everyone else, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, in those times of like hardship, that's where your mission, your values get tested, right? And like, do you deviate from your brand, from your values and mission, or do you lean on those to make decisions? And for us, luckily, we definitely leaned on them, and it served us really well.
Let's begin our wrap up now. First off, just where can our listeners find you and learn more about Blueboard?
Blueboard, you could, find us online, blueboard.com. We got some cool videos on our YouTube channel as well. We're trying to tell more stories. And then for me, hit me up on LinkedIn, Kevin Yip. And then you can find me on Twitter, Kevin Yip without the vowels. So KVNYP.
Whenever I hear, I always ask that question towards the end of the show, and naturally the guest will respond, "You can find me." And in my head, I always hear it as Nelly saying, "You can find me in St. Louis rolling on dubs."
I like that.
All right. So Kevin, who is one person who you want to give a shout out to? Could be a colleague, a mentor, a business partner, anybody.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm going to shout out my co-founder, Taylor. Him and I have known each other. We met playing basketball in third grade, balling out of control. And we've been on this awesome journey together over, the last, since third grade, but, at Blueboard, at least, the last, 10 years now. Wow. Coming up on 10 years, 2012. So shout him out. I think, for us, we've been, you hear horror stories about best friends starting businesses together. And it can be a nightmare. For us, what's made it work is we have this deep trust. We communicate well. And I think where friends get it wrong is we know what each other's capable of, and we hold each other accountable. We push each other, right? And so I think kind of in that accountability of hey, you can do better. Plus, almost pepping, kind of this pep talk of, so let's do better. Let's do as much as we can do. Over the years, that's made a huge difference, kind of in our partnership and in our friendship. And we still go on experiences all the time together. We're both big Niners fans, so we're actually both flying out to Green Bay this weekend. This might date the podcast.
Speaking of being up by 7 or 6 with 2 minutes left.
I was at the Cowboys game last week. But yeah, so and that's part of, me staying mentally healthy is, finding time to do the things you love with the people you love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to our top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on today's discussion. I'll go first and I'll toss it over to you. The topic today was going from no brand to known brand. And I think my biggest thing from our conversation is just the importance of your brand is nothing without a point of view. And you have got to become the, essentially the missionary, the mission for that point of view and the ultimate steward and champion of it if you want to grow your brand. Kevin, top 1 or 2 lessons for the listeners.
The one that's, kind of sticks out to me is, at your early stage and kind of, building on what you said is you need to be that missionary, and kind of the sale has to be about evangelism and, shouting from the rooftop, but you also need to be cognizant about making sure you're really listening to the people you're talking to. And you're really uncovering kind of their motivations, the problems they have, how you think about their problems, what they think, what they do, what they want to do in their day to day, in order to continue to iterate and move the needle to kind of that, story market fit early on.
My final question, which is how we end every episode on this show. Fill in the blank, Kevin. Entrepreneurship is blank.
An emotional roller coaster. That is the one phrase that myself and Taylor have said over the last 10 years. And, it's a whipsaw, right? And, I think it's, there's obviously a lot of lows, but there's tons of highs. And I think, what balances out that emotional roller coaster is hey, understanding the value you have, what mission you're trying to achieve, and knowing that you're continuing to make progress on that, right? And so like, while like the lows might be incredibly bad, the highs might be feeling great. Like, so long as that like roller coaster is like moving the mission forward, that you should be proud and happy, but not satisfied where you are. Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is an emotional roller coaster. He is Kevin Yip, co-founder and COO of Blueboard. Kevin, thank you so much for joining today on Startup Hypeman, the podcast.
Thanks, Raj, for having me.
That does it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a rating and review in your podcast app, or do us one better. Hit the share button. Send this episode to one friend who you think needs to hear it. While you're on your way out, don't forget to follow Startup Hypeman on Instagram and LinkedIn at Startup Hypeman. And remember, you can also connect with today's guest as well. They left their contact info. They love hearing if what they shared helped you in any way. StartupHypeman.com is the place to catch the full 17 season archive and learn all about how to pitch your startup. We'll see you next week, but until then, stay hyped. Raj Nation out.